Welcome. Have you ever gotten to watch a small child take his or her first steps? Like often they're standing, leaning against something solid, and then they look ahead and they just start to venture out and take one step after another. Sometimes there's some wobbling going on, and usually they fall over at some point. But what do you see with the adults in the room? Do the adults get up and look at the child and say, "Oh my gosh, why did you just fall? You probably should just sit down from now on." No. Adults get up and they celebrate. Adults are so excited for those steps. And they don't care about the fall because they know that little child is going to get up and they're going to take more steps, and soon they're going to be walking all over the place. Why is it that when we watch young children do things, we're so excited for that growth? We don't pay attention to the falling. But when we're adults, we're different. We really care about performance and we want growth, but really we want to just show up already knowing how to do things. This is why Dr. Carol Dweck, who is a researcher and professor at Stanford, has developed something called the growth mindset. The growth mindset is about appreciating that we don't learn things overnight and it takes time. And she offers the growth mindset as a set of principles that helps us to focus our mind on the pathway to growth that takes us to success so that we can appreciate it's a process. Things don't happen overnight. Today, I want to talk about what the growth mindset is, but I also want to focus on how this can help you in your relationships. I've often heard people tell me that because they haven't been raised in an environment where there's healthy communication or their parents didn't have a healthy relationship, that it's not going to be in the cards for them. They just can't do it. But I want to invite you to consider that relationships, healthy communication, it's skills, it's things that all of us can learn how to do, whether we've had early exposure to it or not. And it is about growth. It's about being willing to try new things and not to get so fixated on our setbacks that we close ourselves down to the process. So I want to go over the 5 principles that are part of the growth mindset. I want to talk about how they can help us as individuals, but then I want to focus on how we can apply this to our relationships. Okay, the first principle is about embracing challenge. Imagine seeing something that's difficult, but instead of backing away from it, we just embrace it. We accept that a challenge is going to lead to growth. It's going to lead to the development of new skills, new habits, and it's ultimately going to get us closer to our version of success. So maybe as an individual, you take on new tasks at work. You start a new class, try out a new hobby. You allow yourself to have a beginner's mind, but you focus on growth and progress. That is embracing challenge in your individual life. But let's look at in our relationships. What does it mean to embrace challenge? Maybe that means that you realize you're going to have to gain some new communication skills. It's a challenge, but your relationship is worth it. Maybe it means that your partner does something you really don't like, but the pros of being with this person outweigh the cons. So you decide that you want to grow your patience. That's a challenge, but you know that by becoming more patient, you're going to become a happier individual and a better partner. So you embrace that challenge. Maybe there's an issue that requires compromise. You don't want to compromise, but you realize that that's the right thing in this relationship. So you embrace the challenge of compromise. Whatever the issue is, sometimes we have to lean into something that's difficult so that we can grow and that we can experience the things that we want to experience individually or in our relationships. Okay, the next principle is persistence through setbacks. In our individual lives, if we have a setback or we fail at something, it's easy to give up, but ultimately that can keep us from moving forward and pursuing our goals, our dreams. So individually, persistence through setbacks might mean that you just continue to work at something. Maybe you're taking on a new hobby and it's not coming easily, but you just keep doing it. Maybe you get some outside coaching. You take an extra class, but you keep going. Now, in a relationship, persistence through setbacks will likely mean that even when there is conflict or communication breakdowns, you're not going to give up on the relationship. Sometimes if we feel that things should be really smooth and easy, we are really overwhelmed when there's a hiccup. But persistence through setbacks is an orientation that reminds us that there will always be setbacks and there's always going to be little bumps in the road. But persistence, that's the thing that makes things sustainable. That's what gives us endurance and stamina. So focusing on that, practicing that in your relationships. The third principle is about focusing on the effort that you're putting into something. Effort is important. Now, individually, sometimes we don't have control over outcomes, but what we do have control over is how much effort we are putting into something. I often encourage people to audit their effort. If there's something that's important to you, you can't foresee or guarantee that you're going to be able to realize an outcome, but what you do have complete control over is how much effort you're putting into something. It has to be something that you really care about, something that matters to you. But put in the effort and focus on the effort. Now, how does this apply in relationships? Well, in relationships, effort can look like daily maintenance, the little things that we do daily to help maintain trust, to help maintain connection. Sometimes we get tired and lazy, and these things feel like too much effort. But when you step back and you consider that putting in a daily investment, whether it's making your partner coffee or checking in with them at the end of the day, these small things, they do take time and energy, but what they do to maintain the quality of your connection, that's probably going to be a payoff that's worth your investment of time. It does take effort, but it's also your way of daily affirming your partner, letting them know that you still care, and putting those deposits in the relationship account so that if something big does happen, some kind of upset, you're more likely to weather that storm because there's already been a steady investment of trust building activities going on every day. The fourth principle is to accept and learn from feedback. Now, as an individual, this could mean accepting feedback from an employer or a colleague or friends. It's about listening to what others have to say, good and bad. When we hear good feedback, maybe letting ourselves be nourished by that feedback, really taking it in and appreciating that someone has something positive to say about how we've affected them. But sometimes we get feedback that feels critical and there's a sting to it. Sometimes we want to burrow in, we want to hide from the feedback. It hurts. But if we can regulate ourselves enough to just listen to what is being actually said, often what's being communicated is not as harsh as what we're feeling. Sometimes we just have to look for what kernel of truth is there in that feedback that I can accept and incorporate, that I can learn and grow from. Because if you're willing to do that, it's likely to improve your relationships with friends and maybe even your relationships with people at work or at school. How does this apply in a relationship with a significant other? Well, often conflict happens because someone has feedback for us that we don't agree with or we don't want to hear it. But your willingness to listen is going to go a long way to help your partner feel heard. And if you're willing to consider the feedback, even willing to try some things in response to that feedback, that can be an enormous investment that will yield a lot of growth in trust and connection with your partner. So be willing to listen to that feedback, consider that feedback, and see what is there that you can learn from and what could you do differently to grow. The final principle of the growth mindset is to be inspired by others, to look for the success in others and to be inspired by that. Individually, that means looking for role models. If there's something that's important to you, find someone else who's learned how to do it, who is doing it. Be inspired, learn, ask for advice, ask for mentorship. And in your relationship, what does this look like? Well, some of us maybe haven't felt like there's been a lot of examples of healthy relationships, but I know that if you really look around, you're going to find some really good examples of people who are in healthy relationships. Maybe they're newer or maybe they're 50 years long. Look for those examples. Those people will inspire you. They may have some little tidbits to share, some wisdom to offer. But remembering that relationships can last and they can grow and become better over time. This is something that can help you to continue looking forward and not get hung up on conflicts from the past. I hope that some of the principles of the growth mindset have spoken to you today. It's always important to know that what's occurred yesterday, it doesn't define us. It doesn't have to limit us. Maybe you're wondering, well, what if I have a growth mindset but my partner doesn't? Well, that's tricky because if someone is stuck in the past or they don't want to let go of things, they don't want to move forward, they don't want to grow, it can be difficult to grow with that person. But ultimately, you only have control over yourself. And I encourage you to lean into these ideas, try to apply them for yourself as an individual, but consider how they apply in your relationships. If you've heard something today that inspires you, feel free to drop that in the comments and pass this along if you know someone who would like to listen to it. I appreciate you being here today, and let's keep growing together.